And now we go back to Mimi at the CSE, where she'll be talking to the Strategic Energy Advisor at Shell. Mimi?
Thanks, Coco. As you mentioned, we are joined here in the studio, in the training floor rather, by Mr. Ellis Glynn. He's a Strategic Energy Advisor of Shell. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So Shell came out with this report. It's the new lenses in future cities, and there is a fact that I'd like to highlight that struck me the most. It said that by 2050, 3/4 of the world's 9 billion population will be living in cities.
Well, indeed, the global population is increasing. We know that. And 2050, current estimates suggest up to about 9 billion people may be actually living on this planet, of which we predict or suggest up to about 6.3 billion will be concentrated in cities. And that challenge of this ever-increasing strength of urbanization is going to bring with it significant challenges on how we actually manage that growth, how we actually deal with supplying with energy, with water, with food, the pressures that it's going to place on the environment, and importantly, the pressures it's going to actually place on how people choose to live in those cities. So it's going to be very exciting and very interesting on how we actually deal with that over the next 10 to 20 years.
Based on that expectation, that's like one new city for every week.
Indeed. So it's estimates would suggest up to about 1.3 million people will be growing every week over the next 30 years. Another example, another metric, in China, for example, we think the population will increase to about 300 to 500 million people over the next 30 years living in cities. So that's the equivalent of another US or a US plus Britain actually concentrated in cities. And can you imagine the challenges that that's going to bring in terms of how we actually deal with that potential growth inside an urban setting?
So you are here in the Philippines. You're doing a study on Metro Manila.
We have a very exciting week this week. We have not only the Shell Eco Marathon, but we'll also have an engagement session tomorrow with the Powering and Progress Together theme. It's the second time we've run it in Manila. And we've been doing this since 2012, where we bring together thought leaders from business, from governments, from industry, from research institutes, and from city populations to discuss some of the challenges that are actually facing us all in terms of the energy and the food nexus, in terms of the challenge on food, water, and environment.
So your team is currently doing a study about Marikina. Can you tell us more about what are your findings so far?
Well, let me put it into a broader context. Shell has been running scenarios on things like the world energy model and trying to understand the choices of energy evolution that the world is facing over. We've been doing this for about the last 40 years. And we've recognized in that workflow that it's impossible to predict how energy pricing and energy consumption is going to actually be predictable. But within that, the key thing there is to try and map out different scenarios and then ask those fundamental questions on how industry, how government can actually be robust in those different scenarios. Now, within that context, within the last few years, we've actually been working with centres like the Singapore Centre for Livable Cities, and we've recognised this challenge about urbanisation, that come 2040, maybe 75% of the world will be living inside cities, and about 80% of the global energy consumption will be consumed in cities. And so the question is, how are we actually going to manage that and how are we going to deal with that? Now, we've done a lot of work. We've issued a report recently on the new lenses for cities. That was a report that was released with the Singapore Centre for Livable Cities last year. And that outlines some of the themes about how cities are structured and some of the pathways on urbanisation that they could be evolving. Within that, getting back to your question, despite the thought exercise and the process of this, what we've also realised, what we need to do is actually talk with the cities themselves, go into the city centres, talk with the city administration, talk with residents, talk with communities, and really try and understand and map out what the choices that they want to actually go in terms of evolving their cities. So what is the vision for cities from within the city themselves? What are the challenges that cities are actually facing? Every city is different. Every city has different structures, different culture, different constraints. Every city may have a slightly different vision.
So in the case of Marikina, what are your findings?
So we've been working with Marikina City since August last year. We approached the League of Cities about doing a study on Metro Manila, and the League of Cities, with the support of Marikina City, suggested that we have a look at Marikina City. We've been very grateful for that opportunity. It's been a very open, constructive dialogue. And within that, Marikina City has been quite some unique challenges. It's a city that periodically floods, and so it has this perception of exposure. That perception of exposure may be actually impacting its ability to actually strengthen its investment to businesses, commercial and residents. At the same time, it's a city that's very well governed. It's got some very good structures in place, excellent waste management facilities. It has a river system, the Marikina River, which is very beautiful, except at times of flooding. It has a burgeoning restaurant industry as well. So there are a lot of very good positives about Marikina City, but there's also these perceptions of some of the challenges. So what we're trying to do with Marikina City is engage with the city administration, with the League of Cities, with other bodies like the European Chamber of Commerce to try and really understand what their vision for growth is going to be and try and work with them about how we can actually help or facilitate some of the changes.
You mentioned some of the good things they have going for them. What are some of the things that are holding them back?
I think some of our perception at the moment is this perception about flooding and that it's a city that's exposed. It's a study that's still ongoing, so we're still trying to grapple with some of the real challenges that they're facing. We also, one of the other items that is coming forward is that although it's very important, and it's actually fundamental for a city to have a vision on where it wants to be in 10 years' time or in 15 years' time, it's essential that they understand the challenges that they are facing. And critically, it's important to build that roadmap on how they can achieve that vision. The ability to be able to enable that roadmap, however, is fundamentally linked to collaboration. No single body or no single industry can actually be supportive in actually achieving that roadmap, but the collaboration across the city, across other municipal bodies, across federal bodies is absolutely critical.
Okay, one last question before I let you go. You're a geologist. You should know this stuff. It's so hard to imagine that the Philippines is one of the fastest growing economies right now,
yes,
especially in the region. Metro Manila, of course, is bustling with business, or here, urbanization is here. It's hard to connect that to the fact that we are also facing a looming energy crisis this year. How do you make sense of that disconnect?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question for me personally because I'm not familiar in the details of why the energy challenge is occurring this year. I understand that it is occurring, but that is a consequence of previous years that have built up into that. What I can say, however, is that crisis in the energy industry is not new. It is something that we periodically go through. I think what's key and what's important is actually looking forward is being able to understand that these challenges do occur and actually map out now and try and drive and think about those challenges and develop solutions to actually be robust for when those kind of challenges actually occur.
Well, earlier you mentioned that Filipinos tend to be optimistic, and this is good. It could cause problems.
Exactly. We've recently completed a survey that was conducted by Ipsos, where we asked more than 1,000 Filipinos on how they thought how resilient Metro Manila was. And surprisingly, what was interesting is that the result came back 81% of residents believe
so what do we do? I just read one story.
Was resilient. A little bit lower in East Metro Manila. On reflection, as we look into the results of that survey, it actually talks more to us about the nature and the character of Filipino people in terms of their robustness against a lot of the natural disasters. The question we have is actually what does it mean in terms of the structural robustness of Metro Manila itself. Our question here is whether the robustness of the people is actually driving enough policy change and government change to actually look for stronger solutions moving forward in the future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Ellis.
It's been a pleasure.
That was Mr. Ellis from Shell. He's a strategic energy advisor at the foreign exchange market. The peso is stronger at 44.179 against the US dollar. Volume there was $845 million. Now I want to give you the closing numbers first. The index made a quick turnaround last minute. It's actually up now by 0.1% to 7844.06. That is the 9th day of rally for the PSE index. Coco?
Thanks very much, Minnie.